Welcome to the Leaders That Follow podcast. My name is Ricky Jones, and I'm excited to have my brother Andres Aguirre with me this evening. Andy and I met almost 10 years ago. I can't believe it's been that long. And we met on a retreat, and I was actually giving a talk on that retreat. And it was my first time ever doing that. I had just come into the Catholic Church, and so it was sort of a testimony of me sharing my conversion story. And there was one part in that talk where I kind of mentioned in passing a struggle with pornography. And I didn't want to get into detail, and I almost took that part of the talk out. But the Deacon Ken Elsey, God rest his soul, he was helping me kind of prepare the talk, and he challenged me. He said, I know you don't want to share this, Ricky. I know it's not something that you want to talk about publicly, but these men on the retreat need to hear this because they've probably never heard it before. And so for you to share it, it's going to help them to realize, the error of their ways, and that can help, change the path of their life too. And so I left it in there, and I'm glad I did because after I shared my story, I remember Andy came up to me and he said, "Thank you, Ricky. I never heard that pornography was a sin." And so that's kind of where our friendship started. And now 10 years later, here we are again. And I mean, is that how you remember it, Andy?
Absolutely. First of all, thank you, Ricky, for having me here. It's an
Oh,
honor and a pleasure to be with you.
yes.
But I remember, like if it was yesterday, that I talked like you did, and it hit me. It shook me because during that time, I know, unfortunately, I was addicted to that to pornography, and it came to the point that after watching it, I feel guilty,
Mm.
and that was going on for a few years. But I kept on doing it because I felt I wasn't hurting nobody. Nobody
What
was watching me.
And I think that kind of goes with it. Like, I think most people, or I don't want to say most people, but I feel like in my case, it's the same too, because like it's something that you feel kind of ashamed of. Like there is a shame aspect to it. So that kind of in itself is showing you that it's something that you shouldn't be doing. You know you shouldn't be doing it, but you're doing it anyways, right?
Absolutely. But I felt it was okay
Hmm.
because nobody was watching me.
Right.
I would do it when my kids were away, when my wife was away, when they were at work, when they were at school, and there was a 30-minute gap when nobody was home. That was enough time.
Right.
And
That.
then and then thanks to cable TV, you know, thanks to cable TV, you can watch it and nobody will know. And
Exactly.
and like I will watch it, and after I finish watching, I will feel guilty. But like I said, I kept on doing it because I was addicted, and
Mm.
I wanted to stop, but mid tomorrow, but tomorrow never came.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, there was times when my family wasn't home, and that opened the door.
Right.
So but I saw it was normal. Even though I felt guilty, I felt it was normal because it was everywhere. It was online, it was on movies, and it was on cable TV. And to get it, it was really easy. I had to press the button
Right.
on demand. It's kind
Yeah.
of pricey, but but it was. But I was thinking it was worth the money.
Right.
But every, you know, I wasn't hurting nobody. But little did I know, I was hurting somebody. I was hurting myself, even though my kids and my wife didn't know I was watching it. Well, even my wife, she probably had an idea, but my kids had no clue.
Right.
My wife, I don't think she knew. So knowing that, I wasn't hurting nobody, but I was hurting people. I was hurting them. I was hurting myself. And at that time, I didn't know I was hurting Jesus Christ.
Mm.
I'm a, I was a, I was a, I'm sure he was looking down at me and saying, "You shouldn't be doing that, Andy. I'm disappointed in you."
Yeah.
But at that time, I didn't care. I didn't know it was a sin until I heard your talk. And that changed everything. That changed my way of thinking. And I go, Ricky Jones, he's right. He is right.
So up until that point, I guess going back, what was, I guess in your experience, how were you first introduced to it?
Like many, it was just, started when I was a kid,
But
hanging out with kids.
so it's
You know,
something that you saw at school, or how did you, what was your first experience, I guess, with
the,
it?
the neighborhood gang, the
Oh,
neighborhood kids. We were like around 7 or 8, maybe 9 or 10, just regular kids riding bikes. And there was always one guy in the group who wanted to show off and be cool and steal his dad's Playboys. Oh,
yeah.
look what I have,
Right, right, right.
and that, and we were engaged.
Mm-hmm.
And then growing up, there was always one older, teenager who had access to a VCR and had access to the movies. We will watch pornography,
Yeah.
and then little by little, but little by little, I just started watching. I started watching it
Yeah.
all through my teenager years and my young adults.
Yeah.
Even, and they continued until I was married,
Right.
and it continued till my kids were old.
Yeah, and I think the reason I ask is I think I have a feeling or an intuition that for most guys, that's how they come across it. It's through their father or through a parent. Like you said,
Mhm.
that one of the guys found it from their dad, and they shared it with the friends. So in my case, it was the same thing. It's you come across your dad's stash, basically. And so that's your first introduction to sex like for me, because you have sex ed in school and things like that, but it doesn't really prepare you for that. And so I think for most boys, I guess that's where they come across it. And I think that's a challenge to us as fathers is, what example are we setting for our kids? We might think that they aren't seeing it. Like you said, it's something that we do in private, but in the end, it always comes out.
That's correct.
So you talked about, that you had that struggle all the way up until, you were married with children and everything. And then, we met on that retreat. You heard that talk. Where did you go from there?
It opened my eyes.
Hmm.
And after I heard that talk, I go, you know what? What I'm doing is wrong. I need to stop.
So from one day to the next, you stopped?
No. I still, but at least I know, I had to stop. It
Right.
took me 6 years, no, it took me around 6 years after I heard your talk
Wow.
to actually stop
Yeah.
completely. So at this time, it's been 4 years since I haven't watched no pornography.
Wow.
And I'm actually proud of myself.
Yeah.
I'm I'm actually proud, but little by little I stopped.
Right. So what helped you?
Um, it helped me because I didn't want to be a hypocrite. I didn't want to be that guy who, I wouldn't say a hypocrite, but I would go to mass on Sundays,
Hmm.
and then the next day, I will watch pornography, and I didn't think that was right.
Right.
I
Well,
didn't, I was insulting. I felt like I was insulting God.
right, right. But what helped you during that 6 years? What did you do that helped you to finally give it up?
Pray, pray, and then pray, and then pray more,
Yeah.
and ask for intercession from the saints.
Mm. Any saints in particular?
Um, Saint Francis,
Okay.
Saint Francis of Assisi, because he he was poor,
Right.
and it felt when he was poor, and he still asked what God asked him to do, build a church.
Right.
So and so I wasn't really poor financially. I was poor spirituality. I was
Got
spiritual poor.
right.
But if he can go out and beg for food, I can, go out and beg God to help me to
Mm.
kick this habit. to kick this addiction. I know it might not make sense the way I said it, but in my
No,
heart it does.
yeah,
In my heart, I felt like, because he fought, he did the impossible of rebuilding the church.
right,
And I thought it was impossible to quit.
right. Well, of
But
your own, yeah, of your own strength, yeah. So it's you acknowledging that you only God can do it, and you're asking Him to help you.
and for God, with man, it's not impossible, but with God, it is possible.
Amen. Yeah,
So I started putting God into my life as much as I can,
it's great.
and instead of and then it came to the point where it was getting easier and easier and easier, and it was getting easier because of praying. The more I pray the rosary, the less I watch pornography, because it was impossible to pray the rosary and then stop praying the rosary and watch pornography and then right after.
Right, right,
This wouldn't feel right.
right. Yeah.
So that's what did it.
Mm. So I think it's the grace, that grace moving in your life, right? So keeping up your prayer life and that connection with God and the saints is kind of that channel of grace into your life, and that's pushing all that other stuff out of the way.
And with the help of the Holy Spirit.
Amen. Awesome. And so I know that after that you kind of became like this advocate for chastity, kind of like the expert on teaching and preaching other people about chastity, whether it's through, your involvement with RCIA or adult confirmation classes and things like that, serving on retreats yourself. So what was your, I guess your first kind of experience with chastity was hearing that talk on the retreat. For me, I remember even before I became a Catholic, my first experience with chastity was it was actually from a Mormon guy. One of my first jobs I worked at a car wash, a car dealership, and we would, detail the cars after they were sold. And one of the guys that worked there was a Mormon, and everybody else, it's all guys, we're all cussing and, talking about nasty stuff. And this Mormon guy joins the team, and all of a sudden it's like he talks about that he's a virgin and that he's saving himself for marriage, and just that whole concept of chastity for me was kind of like unbelievable. I thought this guy he's weird, I've never heard anyone talk about this before, It's kind of like you said, pornography is normal, society kind of makes us think that way. And so for me to see this guy who he's proud of the fact that he's a virgin, how many teenage or young 20-year-olds are proud of that fact. And so it really caught me off guard, and that was my first real experience with chastity in that sense. So for you, it's on retreat. You hear this talk, and you have this process of conversion. How did you share that message with other people? I guess how did you first start to share that?
There was one of my friends, Jorge Ortiz,
Mm-hmm.
who's a director of a retreat, of an adult confirmation retreat, and he was looking for speakers
Mm-hmm.
to present a talk at this retreat, and he invited me to do a talk. And he asked me, and I asked him, what subject you want me to talk about? He goes, oh, you can pick your subject.
Yeah.
And then, ironically, during that time, there were some cousins. I had a cousin who was 17, and she got pregnant.
Oh, wow.
And she was pregnant. And I just, and I just felt bad, or I'm not sure if it was planned or not. I'm assuming it wasn't.
Right.
I'm assuming it was just by accident.
Yeah.
So, and then I went to Mass, and at the same time, I went to Mass, Sunday Mass, and there was a young lady that I'd seen for 8 years. She was probably like 8 years old when she was sitting in front of me at Mass with her mom and her grandma. And she was like 10 years old. So I kind of seen her grow up. I never actually had a conversation with them, but for so many years seeing them, we were kind of like friends.
Right.
All of a sudden, she was pregnant. And I just felt bad. like I said, I don't know if it was planned or not,
Right.
but I wondered if has anybody ever talked to them about chastity.
Mm.
I just wonder.
Well, yeah, because it's
So,
not something that you hear a lot of talked about, right? Like even in schools, like the sex education is basically their way of talking about sex is giving them condoms, which is basically telling them to do it. So the
yes,
whole idea of refraining from sexual activity before marriage is, unheard of in society.
yes. See, in school they practice safe sex. That's
Hmm.
what they want to practice, right? But in reality, they should practice no sex.
Exactly.
So, uh, and I just felt bad. I think these two young ladies got pregnant, and
Yeah.
I wondered, has anybody ever talked to them about chastity? Maybe, maybe God is calling me to talk about chastity.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe if I do this talk at the retreat, maybe one person will relate and take the heart to talk,
Mm.
and then they will practice chastity.
Yeah.
So that was my talk. That was my topic for the talk. But unfortunately, well, at that time, I had no idea what chastity was. I had no, I had no clue of what the church's teachings. So I spent 2 months preparing for the talk, and I read the Catechism of the Catholic Church and what they got to say about chastity.
Right.
I heard YouTube videos. I read books. Chris Everett and Matt Fran are two of the, and
Oh,
Christopher
yeah.
West.
Jason Everett. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Mm.
Did I say Steve Everett?
You said Chris Everett.
Oh, Chris.
I think
There we go. I know. But yeah,
Stefanik, maybe? I don't know.
so I heard their talks, read their books, and it was amazing the beautiful words like they said. They said if you put they said this they said that you have to put God first.
Mm-hmm.
If you put God first, everything will fall in place. Meaning like you don't have to live in the world. You don't have to ask for sex.
Right.
If you put God first. If you have God in your heart, you wouldn't have to be you wouldn't have to look for anything else, especially for sex.
Well, yeah, because it's basically, we have this. The way I explain it is we have a God-shaped hole, and we try to fill that hole with all these other things, whether it's sex or money or power, you know, and pornography is one way that we try to fill that hole. It's like drugs or alcohol. It's something that we're trying to fill this void, this emptiness that we have inside. And in reality, the only thing that can fill it is God. So I think that's what you're trying to say.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And and they also said that every young lady is special because they're a child of God, and they shouldn't be treated anything. And they're daughters of God, and they shouldn't be treated any less.
Hmm.
And they also have parents.
Right.
They also have siblings, and but most important, they're a child of God, and they shouldn't be treated like trash for
Right.
somebody's object. They shouldn't be treated as lust. They're to be treated as daughters of God and full of love, not
Yeah.
lust.
Yeah. Well, lust, that's a difficult one, right? Because I mean, it's for me, like the way I think about lust, it's like it's the temptation that we have. Because even though it's like you said, we might stop watching pornography, but that temptation, that lust, is it doesn't go away completely, right? Especially, I mean, we're men. We're kind of designed to, when we see a woman, we wanna go plant as many seeds as we can, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
biologically, our bodies are built for that. We want to procreate, right? That was kind of the first command in the Bible, right? Is be fruitful and multiply, but within the confines of marriage. And
Yes.
I think, in the animal world, it's not that way, right? The male sees the female, he handles his business, uh, uh, and moves on from there, right? And so we kind of have that same temptation, I think, as men, and I think, like you said, prayer helps because you're focusing your mind on God, which is the source of all, you know, the fullness of our desire should be in God. And when we have that healthy prayer life, I think that's what really helps us to curtail the desires that we have, the desires of the flesh, I guess, of lust. I don't know. Do you feel the same way?
Absolutely. And lust is defined as looking somebody else as an object,
Hmm.
not as a
Right.
person. So,
Exactly.
you know, we're called to treat everybody with love, not like trash.
Hmm.
And also, if you have a girlfriend, if all you want is to go to bed with them, you treat them like lust. You're
Hmm.
not treating them like a queen. You're not treating them as a child of God.
Right.
Or you're definitely not loving them.
There's no relationship there, right? You're
No.
using them as an object. So you're taking away their humanity. They become a source of your pleasure. That's all that matters. Same thing with pornography, right? You're watching these videos just for your own pleasure, and then you disregard the humanity of that person.
Yes, absolutely. And Christian love, agape love, is defined as doing something for somebody else.
Right? The self-giving love, right? Yeah.
Yes, yes, putting somebody else before yourself.
Hmm.
That's what love is, which is the opposite of lust.
Right. So what about, I mean, we talked about pornography and chastity. So what about within marriage? So when there is a healthy marriage, the husband and wife love each other, are we still called to be chaste?
At 100%, absolutely yes.
And how does
Because
that?
because you can be married, you can be happily married. You don't even have to be cheating on your spouse to not. I mean, and still not living a life of chastity.
Right.
And for example, and for let's say you're happily married, but one of your friends gets married, they have a bachelor party, and they go to somewhere you shouldn't be going,
Mm.
right? You know what
Right.
what
Right.
what, what the a standard bachelor party is. So
Trip to.
you go, so you go, let's say for example to a what should we call it, a strip bar,
Right.
or let's say you go and you look at the entertainment, you're drinking your beverage, but you don't touch them, you don't do nothing, you just look,
Hmm.
and you go home, right? That's definitely not living a life of chastity. Even though you didn't cheat on, or you, even though you didn't physically cheat on your wife, spiritually you did, because Jesus says, if you look at another person, another woman, and lust, that is considered adultery.
Mm. Well, I think a lot of people struggle with that idea, right? Because you say, I'm just looking, I'm not hurting anyone, kind of like you said earlier, right?
Mm-hmm.
So where do we draw that line when it comes to, am I looking and just, admiring beauty, or am I lusting? Like where does that line come?
Admiring a young lady or a young man because they have a good body, because they're dressed good. You have to, as something that you will tell in front of your wife. Oh, that person looks nice.
Mm,
They're in shape. Something you will say in front of your spouse,
mm-hmm.
right? And that's admiring the same thing. If you were admire a car or a waterfall or a rainbow, it's the same thing. It's okay to admire somebody else,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not quite to lust. Lust
Right.
is like if you could, you would.
Mm.
It's like, or you have your inside fantasies in your mind.
Right. So I guess the distinction I would say then is like, it's one thing to, you're driving down the street, you say, oh, she's pretty, but then
Yes.
like you see her, and then you look back, and then you look again, and then that's
And then you say, I wish I could.
right. Then you start
If I
those.
wasn't married, I would.
Right, right. So that's where, like you said, those the fantasies, or you're allowing your mind to go places it shouldn't go. That's
Mm-hmm.
definitely leaning deeper into lust, right? So if you're just saying, "Wow, she looks nice, or she looks beautiful," okay, What about for guys? Like, I think for us, it's more difficult than for women. Because I think men are just more visual, right? So like, women aren't. I mean, they still like to look at men and they still think men are attractive, but I don't think it's the same as with men. Like I think when we see a woman, we're almost immediately drawn to want to look and to fall into that temptation of lust, where women it doesn't happen as much. Why do you think that is?
Well, um, well, I think it does happen. I think it could be equally, but they're more discreet about it.
And-
Meaning like it, meaning like it's not too much of an obvious state, and some females do lust without even knowing they're lusting.
right.
You know, it could be like some young ladies watch what in the Spanish culture is called novelas,
Hmm.
and you always see like the nice looking actors with no shirts.
Right,
They're
right.
looking, wow, in their mind they're thinking, wow, I wish I could be with them.
Hmm.
Right? So that's considered lusting.
Right,
Or they read a romantic exotic novel that goes to details of what's going on.
right,
So that's another, way of lusting that people don't think it's lust, but it is.
right.
So I think it could be equally, but like I said, it's more
That's,
obvious and
yeah.
when gentlemen do it.
Uh-huh.
But
Okay.
that's just my opinion.
No, no, no. I think you're right. I mean, it's different, but I think they do. It goes either way.
Yeah, absolutely.
What I do think is different, though, is that it's harder for us because of the way women dress. Like guys, when we're dressed, you don't see a whole lot, but the way women dress these days, there's a lot. There's not very much that's hidden, right? Almost
Mm-hmm.
everything is visible because of the way they dress. They wear tight-fitting clothes or deep cut stuff, and you can. There's not much left to the imagination, and I think
Yes.
that's one of the things that I try to. I don't understand how women don't understand this because it's like you'll see women wear leggings. Like the whole leggings thing was, I don't know if it's still as popular as it was, but these past few years it seems like women will wear leggings or like workout pants, like yoga pants and stuff, as if those are clothing. Like to me,
Mm-hmm.
leggings are like undergarments, right? It's like if you wear socks or,
Mm-hmm.
because it's not hiding anything. Like I try to explain this to my wife, she doesn't get it. I'm like, if a woman is wearing leggings, a guy they see that and they can imagine everything. Like there's nothing left, and you don't see the skin, but you see all the curves and all the shape, and there's really nothing left to be imagined. You can see it all. But for a woman, they don't get that.
Maybe they want the attention. I think they want the attention.
No,
Because
I think some of them do, but I honestly think that some women don't understand that concept. Like they say, well, my skin is covered. I'm not revealing anything. But for a guy, like when I look at that, I can see everything. It's not they're not hiding anything.
and I and and I feel that they don't know that they're helping men to sin.
That's a good point.
They have no idea. So it goes back. Their mentality. What I said earlier. If I dress like this, I'm not hurting nobody. And
Right.
if they look, they look. That's not my problem. But they don't know. They don't get it. I'm helping somebody sin. I'm helping somebody lust.
Well, and that goes back to that whole the whole concept of veiling, right? Like so, like when you get married, the woman has the veil, right?
Yes.
And and it's the husband who unveils. So the husband is the one who sees her, and
Mm-hmm.
obviously that's kind of symbolic. But if you think about it, in a healthy marriage, the only person
Mm-hmm.
who sees the wife naked is the husband, right? Only the
Yes.
husband unveils the wife, and I think I kind of admire that. Like when you see like Muslims, for example, the women still wear they cover up. They're not just modest. They actually wear the whole
Mm-hmm.
veil that covers the hair and everything. Remember we were at Disneyland one time, and it's crazy at Disneyland because it's usually hot because it's Southern California, so the girls are all wearing super short shorts and tight shirts and everything. And I remember we were in line for one ride, and there was this whole family, and I think they were like Ethiopians, and all the women were veiled and covered, and basically no skin was showing. And I was impressed because for me it's showing a certain level of respect for men, right? Because I see,
Mm-hmm.
like you said, they're taking seriously the fact that they don't want to lead men to sin. And so like our society says, oh, well, women should be free to do whatever they want. And, you know, I'm not saying that all women should wear veils or burqas or anything like that, but there's something significant about that. Like when a woman is willing to veil herself in a certain sense, she's saving that for her husband only, right? And she's showing love for other men by not leading them into temptation. And I think with, here in Utah, just this past week, they passed a law where women can be topless anywhere where a man can be without wearing a shirt. And
Really?
basically, yeah. So, and that's in Utah, and I'm like, what? I thought I got away from California, and it's just crazy. So I guess what happened is a woman was like sunbathing in her front yard or something, and she got a ticket. And so she fought that and said, well, if my husband can be without a shirt, why can't I be without a shirt? And she took it to court, and they won. And so now, anywhere where a man can be without a shirt, a woman could be without a shirt. So it's crazy. It's and people want to rebel and all that stuff, but I mean, it's like there's something special about a woman's body, and a man without a shirt is a lot different than a woman without a shirt, right? So I think for me that concept of veiling of modesty is important because, like you said, it's you're preventing leading other people into sin, but it goes both ways. I think for men too, right?
Absolutely.
But
Because over here in Southern California, you see gentlemen running or jogging with no shirt off. I mean, with no shirt on.
mhm,
And to me, it's the same thing.
yeah,
Put a shirt on. What's the big deal?
yeah. So we kind of we mentioned a little bit about chastity and marriage. How else does chastity apply to marriage?
So basically, is so ba- so basically everything in the other intimacy between you and your wife.
Uh-huh.
Like no movies, no pornography together,
Right, right,
because there's still some couple, some people say, oh, we're married and we can watch it together. No, none of that.
right.
No going to bachelorette parties or bachelor parties, nothing like that.
Hmm. When I think when people hear the word chastity, they might think that the church is like against sex and that sex is bad, but what you're saying is sex is good within marriage, right?
Absolutely, it's God's creation. God wants us. That's what He, well, He made it up. He invented it. So
Right,
whatever God did is good, but people abuse it.
right.
Hmm.
Or pervert it, right?
Yes, absolutely.
They want to take something that's reserved for marriage and get that without having the commitment, right? Without having
Yes,
the lifelong commitment to each other.
absolutely.
What about so I mean I guess there is sometimes that you do say no, right? To sex
Yeah,
even within marriage.
yes, of course, absolutely. There could be, for example, me and my wife, we practice natural family planning,
Hmm.
which is beautiful, which is one of the best things I ever did.
Really?
And
Let's tell me about
what it is it's not Catholic contraception, what people think it. People think it is.
right,
It, it's basically um, it's basically logging your wife's fertility.
right. The
You know,
cycle, right? The monthly cycle.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the cycle is monitoring when she's fertile and when she's not,
Hmm.
and then so it'll be up to you when you want to have relationships.
Right.
And if God is calling, if you feel God's calling you to have kids, you can monitor the fidelity on the cycle, if that
Right.
makes sense.
Yeah, yeah.
But it brings us closer together because there's some times when we choose not to have sex.
Mm-hmm.
But in the, it could be a couple of weeks, 3 weeks. But in those 3 weeks, we don't worry about having sex. We worry about talking to each other.
Communication, right? Yeah.
Yes, yes. And to us, it brings us closer to God.
Yeah, and I think that's big, especially because I mean, for guys, you know, we think of intimacy, we think of sex, right? We think of physical intimacy,
Mm-hmm.
but intimacy is also communication, right? Being able to just talk. Like for most people, like when you're dating, how much time do you spend talking to each other? And then, you get married, you have kids, and your time is a lot more limited. And so you want to, you know, get into bed, knock boots, and handle your business. But how much time are you putting into your relationship and that communication and really, not just talking about how your day was, but real intimate communication, right? And
Yes,
NFP allows for that, not only because, like you said, there's the times where you're deciding, okay, we're not, we're gonna abstain from sex for this certain period, and like I said, 3 weeks is that can be considered a long time, but if when you look at the whole cycle, there's only a small portion of time where the woman is actually fertile, right? And
yes.
when you're charting each day the signs of fertility, you come to know pretty accurately when those days of fertility are, right? And so I think part of the whole communication thing is being aware of that, because you have to be open and honest and talking about that every day, because when you're charting every day, you're monitoring those signs, and then you have to have that conversation, and you have to say, are we if we do this tonight, there's a high probability that you could get pregnant. And to be able to talk about that and make those decisions before you do it, I think that's a powerful moment, a powerful conversation.
Absolutely. And I feel, and I love it. I love it, and I feel me and my wife are closer to each other, and we're closer to God.
That's awesome. I mean, I think it's great that, because I've heard people talk about NFP before, but I like how how like the big smile that you have on your face. You say it's beautiful. I love it. It's something that most guys probably wouldn't think about that. They think like, man, I have to wait another week. I think that's great that you're so happy about it.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm assuming my wife is too.
That's great. So how long have you guys been practicing that?
Probably like 9 months.
Wow, that's great. So one of the other things I think with this whole topic of chastity is, we talked about different ways that you can free yourself from pornography. You talked about prayer a little bit, but I think one of the other things is avoiding the near occasion of sin, and that it's difficult. Like in that case, when you're even if you're married and that you say you want to make love to your husband or to your wife, but you know that they're fertile. So you say, well, instead of, abstaining and waiting, a couple days, let's use contraception, right? What's wrong with that? Because I think there's a lot of people who probably think that way, right? Say, well, sex is good. Like we're talking about, sex is good. God made it. God created it. So we should be able to have it whenever we want. And if we don't want to have a baby, instead of abstaining during that fertile period, we're just going to use contraception. What would you say about that?
What did God say? And what did God say? He's, God, and God gave us the gift of relationships.
Hmm.
You know, where we can get, where we can give ourselves to each other.
Right.
Where I can give myself to my wife, and my wife give herself to me, just like Jesus does to the church. He gave up himself for the church.
Right.
And the same way, we have to do the same thing for each other. So when we have relationships, we're giving each other a gift of
Okay.
ourselves.
Yeah, I think the
Uh,
best way I can think about it is, like you said, that gift of self you're giving yourself completely, and that means
Mm.
even your fertility. If,
Absolutely.
if you're using condoms or birth control pills or whatever, you're not giving yourself completely because you're using either drugs or an actual physical barrier
Hmm.
to prevent that total gift of self to each other.
Hmm.
And we don't think about that. We think of sex just as the pleasure part, but it's like you said, it's that gift of your
Hmm.
whole self to the other person, and that means you're willing to give yourself, even if that means a baby might be born.
Yep. So basically, if you use contraception, if you use I can't say it, but if you use it, you're putting God out of the equation, and you're not giving your whole self to your spouse.
Right.
You're putting a barrier in between your spouse, and
Hmm.
you're not saying I love you. You're saying I want to use you for my pleasure.
That's it right there. Yeah. They're objectifying that person. Instead of being your spouse, you're using them as an object. You're
Hmm.
dehumanizing them. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So has that helped you? It sounds like you feel that you practicing NFP has helped your marriage.
It sure has, because it gives us time, like in the time of absence, to talk to each other,
Right.
and not worry about let's go and Mhm.
Yeah.
And it's full communication every night because we have to talk about the charting.
Right. Right.
So both of us do our part.
Right. And that I think that's important, right? Because I think
Mhm.
with contraception, it's like either one or the other is kind of responsible for getting the stuff, right? Like,
Yes.
oh, I got the condoms, or I'm on my birth control pills, or whatever. But there's no real conversation about it, right?
Yes.
So with
Yes.
NFP requires that open and honest communication
Hmm.
and that decision making and discernment to say, are we are we prepared for another child at this time or not?
Yes. And also using contraception, it's considered a sin.
Hmm.
So if you use contraception, that means you're living in sin. And
Hmm.
what happens if I'm living in sin and I get hit by a bus the next day,
What the hell?
and I don't have a chance, and I don't have the chance to go to confession,
Right?
and I don't want to be in that position.
Exactly. Yeah.
So so knowing so using natural family planning, it frees me from sin. So if I get hit by the bus, at least if I go at least if I go down to hell, it's not for that. You know,
I like that. I've never heard it described that way, that it frees you from sin, but that's true.
and it liberates me. I don't have to feel guilty after we have sex. When we use contraception, there's
Right.
no guilt.
So you're involved with adult confirmation classes, and you meet with these adults who are preparing for the sacrament of confirmation
Hmm.
on a weekly basis.
Yes.
So do these topics that we're talking about come up during that time that you're with them?
Um, Sometimes they all depends. Every session is different.
Right.
But that's a subject. I work with young adults, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, and
Okay.
that's a subject they don't want to hear.
Right.
You know, they, they don't want to hear it. So we have to present it in a lovable way
Hmm.
for they can say, yes, you're right.
Right.
Because if you were to tell them contraception is bad, if you have sex before marriage is against the church's, you know, it's a sin. It's against the church's teachings. They're not gonna be want to be part of the church.
Right.
Why would I want to be part of a church if they have so many rules?
Right. Right.
Why would I want to be part of the church if I can't do something that I want to do?
Right. And I think the way that you present it right now is the perfect way because you're not saying don't do this, don't do that. This is bad. This is bad. You're saying this is beautiful for my marriage. Look at how you're sharing the benefits of it, and you're not just talking about don't have sex outside of marriage or you go to hell. It's you still say that, and that's important that you do. And the reason I asked the question is because at the very beginning of our conversation, you talked about how when you heard me talk about pornography as a sin when we went on that retreat, that was the first time you had ever heard that. But you had
Mm-hmm.
been going to mass for how long?
Sorry? I'm sorry, can you take it, please?
Well, before that retreat, you've been going to mass for a while, right? Or no?
3 years?
For 3 years. So in those 3 years, did you ever hear the priest?
Absolutely not.
And so that's a big problem, right? And that's what I'm
Yes.
talking. That's kind of why I asked. Does this conversation come up with your adult confirmation? Because it's unfortunately, because the same with me. I don't maybe once or twice in my almost 10 years, I guess 10 years as a Catholic this year, have I ever heard a priest talk about any of what we're talking about today. And
No.
if people are going to church and they're expecting the priest to be the one to teach them these things, and it's sad that they're not getting that.
That's correct. But that's why that's why God puts the people like you in people's lives. For you can be God's instrument.
Yeah, I think it's important for us as laity to do that, right? And
Yeah.
the role that you have in your parish as well. You're reaching many people and touching their lives in a way that's inspiring them to follow this path, right? You're not just pointing out all the bad things and saying, you're gonna, die a sinner and go to hell. You're stating that, but you're also stating, look at how beautiful this way of life is, because that's really what Jesus is calling us to. It's a way of life, right?
Yes. Absolutely.
But it's hard, like you said. It's a challenging topic, right? People don't want you to get in their business when it comes to their sex life, right?
And people don't want to hear it.
Right.
People don't want to hear it, especially when they say, "Oh, don't do it because it's the church's teachings."
Right.
But
Right.
we have to say it. If you love your girlfriend, you'll wait till you get married.
Right.
And you wait till you get married because if you want something else from her, you're abusing her.
Mm-hmm.
You're treating her like trash. But if you really love her, you'll treat her like a queen.
Right. And they don't see it that way, right? They see it
No.
as sex is a natural part of a relationship, and it makes us feel good, and it's a way that we show our love for each other, which it is. But when you're not married, what's to stop you from the next day going and finding another one and doing the same thing?
Absolutely.
The commitment part is a big part of it. That's what gives you the privilege of entering into that, right?
Yep. Absolutely.
Well, that's great, man. We've touched on almost all the most controversial sex teachings that the church has, right?
Well, to me, it's not controversial.
No,
Well,
but
well, to me, but I can talk about this all night, but I understand that people don't want to hear it, so that makes it controversial.
yeah. So when you bring it up to your like in your your adult confirmation classes, how do they respond to it usually?
Oh, one time, they didn't like it. they, they they didn't want to hear it because everybody was doing it.
Right.
You know, everybody was doing it, and they don't want to be categorized as a sinner.
Right.
So like I said earlier, you have to explain it that waiting abstinence is beautiful.
Hmm.
It's beautiful. You treat each other with dignity.
Right.
You know?
It's like you said, if it's a gift that you're giving to your spouse, then how much more special is that gift if they're the only person to receive it, rather than 20 other people have had that same gift? It's not as special to them, right?
Yep, absolutely.
And I think with all this sex stuff, all the sex teachings, like the difficult part is, like you said, people don't want to hear it. It's something that most people don't accept from the church. But it seems to me that the majority of people, even Catholics, who are at mass but can't go receive communion, I think the majority of the people who can't receive communion can't because of the sexual sins, right? Because
Hmm.
they're either living with somebody and not married, which I think is a big one. Um, I remember when we were teaching catechism, we taught catechism for 5 years, and it was family catechism, so we would teach the parents, and the parents would teach their kids. And I would say a majority of the parents couldn't go to communion, but they were telling their kids, "Oh, you have to go receive communion." And a lot of times the kids eventually would be like, "Well, why do you want us to go if you can't go, if you're not going up there, you know?" And so they're kind of challenging them, and a lot of them, there's nothing holding them back from getting married. It's not like they've been married before or anything. It's just they haven't made that decision to get married to make it official, right? And
Yes.
so the kids saying that would be kind of a little push for them, and I think that was good, especially to come from your own kids, for them to challenge you on that. But it's true. It's like if you can do all the stuff that married people do, what's holding you back from getting married? They'll say, "Oh, well, I don't have the money. I want to do a big wedding and stuff." But well, you've already got 5 kids and you've been together for 20 years. Do you really need a big wedding? You just need to make it official before God, right?
Yep. Amen. You got to put God in your marriage.
Yeah.
Because if you don't get married, but in God's eyes, you're raising your family without God.
I think that's a good point because a lot of people who get married civilly only, who are not sacramentally married, I think it's sad because you're setting yourself up for failure because marriage is not easy, right? I think
Hmm.
it's difficult because it's like you said, it's that constant gift of self. You're always sacrificing for the other person and then for your kids too. And so, what do you need? You need the grace to be able to 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 live that out. And when you're not married in the church, when you're not married sacramentally, when you just go to the justice of the peace and get your marriage license, that's just the government basically acknowledging your relationship. It doesn't mean anything other than that. And so you're not receiving all the grace that people receive in a sacramental marriage. In a sacramental marriage in the church, God is giving you that grace to be able to love your spouse unconditionally on a day-to-day basis. And I think that's why so many people, like I use my own family as an example. Almost every one of my relatives are divorced and remarried, and that's because none of them are married sacramentally. So you can't really, the way I look at it is you can't really expect them to to get through it if they don't have the tools they need to do it. They're not equipped for it because they don't have the grace. And so
Exactly.
I think for me, that's where the value of the sacrament of holy matrimony comes from. And we don't really talk about it that way. We think of marriage as it's just this ceremony that we do, and we do it in the church because the church is beautiful, and we don't think of it as no, it's giving us the grace that we need to equip us to live out this lifelong commitment that we're entering into.
Yep. Absolutely. You got to put God in your marriage.
Right?
Because with God, everything's possible. But when it's not, when you don't have God in your life and your marriage, how you gonna raise your kids without God?
Right. Yeah, it's like going into battle without a weapon, right?
Exactly.
You're not
Exactly.
equipped for it.
Yep. God is always by your side.
So, any advice that you would give people who are struggling with pornography or living a chaste life?
Pray, 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 and then when you're done praying, pray some more. Because it's kind of hard to watch pornography after you just pray the rosary.
Right.
It's kind of and 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 get support groups. There's a lot of people out there that can help you, that can keep you, they can put you accountable, or they
Mhm.
can make you accountable at what you watch and what you do,
Right.
and then join a ministry, serve serve the church, just be active.
Right. Keep yourself busy, right?
Absolutely, yeah. Don't give yourself time to do it.
What about like in the gospel, Jesus says, if your eye causes you to sin, pluck it out. If your hand causes you to sin, cut it off. How do you think that relates to this whole idea of pornography?
If you have a DVD collection or the old school VHS collection of pornography, throw it away.
Hmm.
If you have a device, throw it away. Don't use it. Just throw it away. Don't
Well,
use it.
and it sounds so simple, but for most people, their phones, people are really attached to their phones because not just because of pornography, but because it's their way that this is the excuse people make, right? That's the way they're connected to the world and to their loved ones, and a phone is not just a phone, right? It's a computer. It basically can do anything a computer can do. So for people to go from a smartphone back to like a flip phone that's just
Yeah.
make calls, right?
Yeah.
That sounds
But
that sounds like this drastic thing, but in essence, that's what Jesus is talking about, right? He's not
exactly.
necessarily saying cut your eyeball out or cut off your hand, but it goes back to what we're talking about, avoiding the near occasion of sin. If you know that having that phone, that smartphone, is going to continue to lead you into that temptation, then you got to do something about it, right?
Yeah,
Because
absolutely.
otherwise you're going to be tempted again and again. And so why
Yeah.
not move that temptation from yourself? And what do you need a phone for? To call people. As long as your phone can call, that's the most important thing, right? You can call and send text messages. All the other stuff is just luxury, right? You don't really need that.
Because what happened, you can keep your phone, but you're gonna take that but you're gonna take that phone all the way to hell. I know it could sound a little bit drastic, but that's probably that's the truth. You're gonna take it with you.
Yeah. Yeah, it's tough, but it's like if you really wanna follow Jesus, what does he say? You gotta deny yourself, take up your cross, and follow me.
Yep.
We all have different size crosses. We all have different things that we've got that challenge us, right? And so, if what we want is to love God and to put Him first, are we willing to put aside our smartphone? Are we willing to, if we have a
Yep.
computer, are we willing to put it in the living room where we're not in a private place where we can do those things? Are those sacrifices that we're willing to make for God and for our marriages, for our families,
Absolutely.
right? Well, I think that's definitely an important one. Well, it's been good. I think this is an important conversation to have, and I'm hoping that, people who hear this video, maybe they haven't, just like how our first encounter was, maybe they haven't heard it talked about before because priests aren't willing to do it. Maybe this will be their first encounter with this whole topic of chastity, and maybe that will inspire them to make changes in their lives.
I pray.
Yeah,
I pray
certainly.
that happens.
All right. Well, thank you for joining me, brother. I hope we can, have one of these conversations later and keep up the good work that you do. I mean, those text messages, you're a master evangelist. Sending out the messages that you do, I think it really impacts a lot of people. And sometimes you might think it's something simple, but those words can be what that person needed to hear at that moment. Maybe they were struggling and going through something difficult, and those words of hope, of inspiration, of encouragement are what people need to hear. So thank you for doing that.
You're welcome, and all glory to God.
Amen, brother. Well, thanks again, and hopefully we'll talk soon.
Well, thank you for having me.
All right.
God bless.